Good evening, school board and Wauwatosa community. I am Luke Pinion, your Chief of Pupil and Family Supports. We are here for our annual update within the Division of Pupil and Family Supports. I'd like to have my team introduce themselves first. We'll start with Shonda.
Good evening. My name is Shonda Holland. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion.
Hello, team. My name is Stacy Clem. I serve the district as the Director of Special Education.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Geisler, and I am the Director of School Safety.
Hello, Daryl Hansen, and I'm the Director of Student Success.
All right, thank you for the time tonight. It should be noted we are recording this presentation on July 21st, plenty of weeks in advance of the August 11th when this will be presented to the community and the board. Please know that there are some slides that might be added as we're early on in pulling the data, so there may be a couple minor additions as we move closer to the board meeting. Just wanted to give that caveat as we're several weeks away. What you will see for tonight, certainly a big chunk of our presentation is around our yearly behavior and discipline data review connected to different adult expectations, actions, and evidence-based strategies. You saw many of that data when we presented in February as well during our mid-year presentation. We will now wrap that all together for the whole year in comparison to some prior years where possible. We'll have an update on DEIA, as well as special education and student services, as well as school safety. You've seen this before. We like to ground in this, especially when we're looking at really large sets of data, but it is essentially the ladder of inference, which is a mindset and protocol when groups or individuals are reviewing and looking at large sets of data. It is very innate and kind of natural for us to want to jump to conclusions, assumptions, or actions when looking at data. We want to keep ourselves and the board and community really low on that ladder and thinking about observations, noticings, maybe wonders that they have, and try to center there before we jump all the way up the ladder, as there's a longer protocol to unpack and plan around data such as these. We continue to get better and better with our data accuracy. This has been a work in progress, something we will always continue to strive for in terms of the accuracy of the data we're looking at, both on the behavioral end as well as discipline. We collaborate with the academic office, and we really work closely with all teams to continually improve the consistency in how we're recording behavior across schools, to make sure we are making accurate comparisons, and then that also determines different allocations of resources. We will start by having Dr. Hansen review some of our attendance and other data.
Thank you. So as you mentioned, let's begin with some attendance trends. Overall, this graph will show you that student attendance rate increased almost 1% between 22-23 and the 23-24 school year and is now maintaining at 94%. Next step, we'll look at some discipline data. Before we begin reviewing the disciplinary data, though, let's ground in our disciplinary framework. Just a reminder that the framework was created to ensure that all schools and staff provide equitable and consistent disciplinary efforts. The first section of the framework outlines proactive measures and how schools work towards ensuring social-emotional growth and support for all students. The second section includes a table of misbehavior, including how those are coded in our data system with an appropriate range of disciplinary consequences for administrators to use as guidance. The framework was launched in August of 2022, has been refined each summer since, and has anchored the practice behind much of the data we'll examine. So this first graph depicts the total and disaggregated number of major office disciplinary referrals, also known as ODRs, from the past 3 years. What you see there is between the first and the second year of the framework implementation, there was a significant decline in referrals overall, 963 to be exact, and declines in each subgroup. Between the second and third year of implementation, we are generally sustaining the significant drop. If you'd like to dig in to some more of the details, this graph outlines the major office disciplinary referrals by school over the past 3 years. Jumping to our next slide, this focuses on our suspensions. This graph here notes the number of students who engaged in behavior that was considered violent and resulted in suspension. The number of students involved in a fight or physically endangering behavior has continued to decline.
And I would add, this really verifies a lot of the anecdotal information we're hearing and seeing and observing in our schools about the significance and severity of behavior decreasing over the last couple of years, and this really confirms that as well.
Thank you. This particular graph shows the number of students each year who have received an out-of-school suspension. This is also disaggregated by student groups. Overall, the number of out-of-school suspensions has declined each year. The next two slides share additional disaggregated out-of-school suspension data, first by grade and then by school. I would encourage you to pause this recording if you're interested in reviewing those details. So the graph that is up there right now is showing you by the total number of, we're going to move on to in-school suspensions. As outlined in the disciplinary framework, there's a continuum of adult responses, including in-school suspensions, available when an undesirable behavior occurs. So now let's examine our data around our use of that type of a response. So this graph indicates the total number of in-school suspensions across our system and disaggregated by subgroup. Similar to the number of office disciplinary referrals and our use of out-of-school suspensions, the total number of in-school suspensions has declined since the peak in 22-23. The next two slides allow you to see in-school suspension data by grade and school. Feel free to pause again if you'd like to look into those details some more. Now I can turn the floor over to Ms. Clem.
Nope, you're muted, Ms. Clem.
As the slide states, risk ratio is a comparison ratio. For example, students identified with disabilities compared to students not identified with disabilities, or white students compared to our Black students. If you would like to learn more about risk ratio and how they're calculated, please pause and use the link within this slide. Risk ratio is used by the state to determine disproportionality by comparing data between groups over a 3-year period. To read this slide, a Black student is 8.83 times more likely to receive an office discipline referral than a white student. A student with disabilities is 2.83 times more likely to receive an office discipline referral as compared to a student not identified with a disability. Staying low on the ladder of inference, there is a great deal of work to be done as these numbers are concerning. As we continue to make progress in our overall behavioral referrals, the referrals are not proportionately distributed for Black students or students with disabilities. We will continue to analyze the trend of office discipline referrals. For discipline, we are currently identified by the state for disproportionality and disproportionately disciplining our Black students in comparison to our white students. The state is looking for a 0.25 reduction per year over a 2-year period to demonstrate we are making improvements in our disproportionality. Then we are on watch on the 3rd year. In 2 years, we have reduced by 0.46 data points. Though this is improvement, the data is still not good. To support this work, schools now have risk ratio data to analyze the outcome in their buildings. We are working to support them to analyze their practices at the building level through teaming processes.
And I would add too, you saw 2 slides here about risk ratio that we really focus on. The first was the behavior itself. And then the second that is up right now is the suspension side, so that adult choice. The suspension side is what is monitored statewide as well as federally for our joint federal notifications. The next slide is going to talk a little bit about how that's monitored, and I want to speak to the disappointment we had, I guess, in seeing the rise after the dramatic drop from that first semester in the suspension data where we are monitored. So not only do we work very closely with the Department of Public Instruction around this process, we have ongoing meetings with them. It is also aligned to our comprehensive coordinated early intervening services, which is a slice of budget that we use specifically to target dyspro and early intervention and really make sure that we are aligning funds based on our root cause and our needs. So we will be engaging in another root cause analysis. These data will be really important to say why the rise from where we had the reduction and really understand that. DPI has been very proud and continually praises the work that we're doing around dyspro. So we've been happy on the feedback we've been receiving from them. And then certainly we'll use risk ratio on a regular basis at the school level and district-wide to keep a pulse on that as we move through the year. There is some manual calculations and lifts that the data team has to do to pull this data. So doing it at a more frequent basis is not the most efficient, but we want to make sure we're keeping a pulse on it. Shonda also does building-based walkthroughs with principals around essentially equity walkthroughs, monitoring how core beliefs are coming to life in the schools, and really honing in on specific core beliefs each trimester. We also look at student survey data. You've seen those data in some of the strategic plan milestone updates. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit as well. And now to Shonda for some of the other action steps associated with dyspro, knowing that after we conduct another root cause, some of this may shift or be reallocated in terms of where the most prioritized areas are.
Thank you, Luke. This next slide outlines ongoing efforts to improve student outcomes through data-driven practices within PACE, SST, and the newly introduced child study teams, all aimed at strengthening our MLSS work. It also emphasizes our commitment to culturally responsive learning environments through targeted professional development, alignment with updated strategic plan goals, and the continued implementation of support groups for marginalized and underserved students. The programs that I'm referring to are Best Buddies, Own It, True School, Girls on the Run, etc. These programs will remain integral to fostering equitable access to support, belonging, and opportunities for all students. Daryl?
Thank you, Shonda. Student services staff, which is comprised of school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, mental health specialists, and social emotional specialists across all levels of our system, have intensified their efforts to provide small group social, emotional, and behavioral learning opportunities to students in need. During the first semester of 24-25, approximately 260 students engaged in these specific services. Also, over the past 3 years, the School Culture and Student Success Committee, comprised of student services staff, has worked to achieve Objective 3.1 of our 22-25 strategic plan. This objective asked us to introduce and/or revise a developmentally appropriate district-wide framework that supports and integrates trauma-sensitive, restorative practice, and PBIS school programs to allow us to provide access to support and services for all students. Since the roadmap's launch in 2023, the framework has been used by school-based teams to incorporate culture in school growth plans and to engage in continuous improvement around adult practices and systems that support student belonging and engagement. The committee would like to see further work directed on integration of these efforts into classrooms. Both of these action steps, SEB groups and the student success roadmaps, connect to our MLSS work, which I'll share a little bit more about in a few minutes.
And then lastly, we have an opportunity to increase our utilization and the expectation for the Aurora Student and Family Assistance Program, the SFAP, which can afford students and anyone in their household up to 6 sessions per issue that they might be having. It's a great introduction into mental health care and talking to a professional. We are not seeing the utilization we'd like on the school level in terms of administrative referrals for violations of, let's say, drug and alcohol policy that really gets to the root and does more for a student in building skills. So we'll be going into the year with a greater expectation around the utilization of that. And then Shonda will talk a little bit about some of the system level and adult practices that we focus on as well and have expectations around. Again, not a lot of this is new for the board unless they are new members. Shonda?
Yes, this next slide provides an overview of system level and adult behavior shifts aimed at improving student outcomes and fostering equity. It highlights the use of data-driven teaming with families, PACE, SST, and the introduction of child study teams to create proactive academic and behavior plans. Additionally, it emphasizes the importance of culturally responsive practices, relationship building, and high expectations for all students. School administrators are also expected to utilize restorative approaches, including the Aurora Student and Family Assistance Program, rather than relying on punitive measures.
An additional adult action is seclusion and restraint. Each year, seclusion and restraint data is reviewed by the school board and supported by a monitoring process through the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. This data will be used to support the schools who have a pattern of high seclusions and restraints by completing a root cause analysis and possible next steps to ensure these actions are used only when absolutely necessary. Organizationally, we utilize nonviolent crisis prevention training, which has a focus on de-escalation strategies to further develop staff skills for moments of crisis.
Now we're going to transition to more higher level discipline. Again, data that we've shared regularly with the board and community. There are some great celebrations within these data as well. Here you can see a snapshot by year since 2016-2017 school year of the administrative hearings. And again, for the community that might not be as familiar with the lingo, an administrative hearing is a pre-expulsion process. So when certain events happen, it's an alternative to going straight to board for expulsion, but really allows us to get everyone around the table, understand what happened or what's happening, understand the impact it has on many people that the student may or may not even know or see, and really determine, is it safe to return the student on conditions and supports? Do we need to go and move forward with an expulsion hearing with the board, or do we try an alternative environment for a period of time, rep in supports and extra conditions, and really try to target the skills that are lagging, and the student works their way back to the school? So kind of three paths from that hearing. You can see the last 2 years from 22 and 23, there were 74 that our team and myself did. Last year, 71, dramatic reduction this year to 39, which is an excellent celebration. And again, indicative of the significance and severity of behaviors we're seeing in the schools are less. And some would theorize too that that really frees principals up when they're not dealing with the very significant events to tend to some other low-level issues with more thoroughness and fidelity. When we break down the 39 for this school year by category, we really have the majority of them under endangering health and safety. So different types of threats or fights. There were 12 for repeated refusal. When we get to the repeated refusal point, there's an expectation that there is a trail of planning, of supports, of interventions, so we can really see were those effective or not. We have a loose weapons policy, so it can be anything that's look-alike or used, could be used in that way. And then 4 for alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Generally, when there's recidivism or we see multiple incidents, we would have an administrative hearing for that. And then you can see the breakdown as well by free and reduced lunch, as well as EML status. Also, pay attention to the footnote. Sometimes categories, there might be 2 in one pre-expulsion, so we code it as sort of the primary instance. Good example of that might be a culminating incident that would have been a hearing, but then we are also looking at it for repeated refusal for a history. Here's the breakdown by grade level. Again, feel free to pause if you want to digest this a little deeper. And outcomes. Again, since development of champions, which has been very successful, big shout out to our teachers, Ben and Mary, for making that place a place students want to be and are having success. We keep getting good feedback from parents about their time there. But about 14 of the 39 from those administrative hearings returned to school with very clear supports, skill building built into the plan, and then expectations. 23 moved to a different environment, again, with supports and conditions, worked their way back, and 2 decided to withdraw as a result of the hearing. We had 0 expulsion hearings this year, which again is a big celebration when we look at our last couple of years. Speaking of expulsions, here are the trends. The data before 22-23, I did inherit coming into the office, but I believe it to be accurate. And you can kind of see a notice means we scheduled something. We said we were going to go to expulsion. We had no notices this year, but as I mentioned before, we did have 2 withdrawals in lieu of any other planning or desire to kind of move through the plan that we were setting for the student to move forward. These data are, some of these are part of our milestones from the last 3-year strategic plan, but we wanted to share some of the highlights with you. Let me see if I can shrink this a little bit for you. So we started, and you sort of see the ebb and flow of the year with these responses from students, and that ebb and flow kind of is mirrored in a lot of these questions. But you can see that students feeling safe at school is at a high as of spring of 2025, which is exactly what we want to see that number continue over time, even with the ebb and flows, that on the whole, the trend is moving in a positive direction. And students wanting to be themselves at school, very important that students can be who they are when they enter our doors. That has also ebbed and flowed, but is currently sitting at 79%. The change hasn't been too dramatic up and down on that number. And then two more, feeling welcome at school. We know how important that is to feel like you belong and you're welcome. We had a low of about 84.2% in winter of 2024, peaked in the fall of that same fall of 2024, and then we ended the year at about 86.2. We'd like to see that number increase over time. And then lastly, for safety reasons, we want to make sure students know what to do when there's a safety emergency. And this is another celebration that 91% of our students report that they know what to do when there's an emergency in the school. All right. So what are some best practices and strategies? Certainly, as I said earlier on, we will have teams diving into this, especially around our DISPRO data, determining what needs to change, what needs to be different, and how we might leverage those CEIS funds in a way that continues the initial trend we had of dropping. Always a shifting adult mindsets and practices. We've talked about this every year, but really that is hugely important on the front end of entering a space with moving away from what's wrong with the child to what's going on in the environment and what we're doing that is working or not for a child. As Daryl mentioned, really leaning into that front end of the disciplinary framework and making sure we're setting the stage, teaching skills, and adhering to our universal practices for all students, as well as the tiered approach when things aren't working. As I mentioned, increasing the utilization of the SFAP. And then, as Daryl had mentioned earlier, really further leaning into the student success roadmap that integrates restorative practices, trauma-informed care, and PBIS. We will continue to do discipline norming sessions with all administrators and deans to be sure that we have consistency across all sites in how we move through incidents of behavior. We will continue providing refreshers around our threat assessment process. The threat assessment process is one of the biggest levers to ensuring school safety that we have. So we want to make sure we stay really vigilant and refreshed on that. I mentioned the Champions program has been a huge success. I would love to scale it up. Right now, we're a bit limited with space and physical space, and we're kind of seeing where the recommendation from the ad hoc 712 committee may land. Continually revising and coming back to our active supervision practices. Again, another really high leverage proactive piece of what does active supervision look like in different settings. And we have some guidance developed that we review with administrators and deans as well. We talked about our culturally responsive learning environments, PL targeted, and really being thoughtful about how student services staff, the roles that Daryl spoke to earlier, are distributed based on needs. So we have a process, a protocol that's data-based that really assesses different points and different data points from each school to determine what their needs are and how much staffing is appropriate within student services. And then lastly, administration and special education case managers continue to increase that collaboration for students, especially after a significant incident occurs. That debrief can be hard to find the time, but it is so important so we can learn more about the student and more about what we're doing that is working or not, and continually get better when it comes to significant incidents in our response. Now to Shonda for a bit of an update on all things DEIA.
Thank you, Luke. This year, we launched our inaugural Martin Luther King Jr. Speech and Art Contest, continuing to elevate student voice and cultural expression. We also each building is assigned a DEIA advocate, and DEIA-focused professional learning was delivered district-wide by these individuals. We've seen a clear shift in adult understanding and implementation of the equity core beliefs as reflected in qualitative staff feedback. Schools have also enhanced the celebration of diversity through inclusive events and visual displays that honor students' identities. Our Equity Walk data shows steady progress. In semester 1, 57.1% of buildings demonstrated proficiency in their selected equity core beliefs that they were focusing on, with 42.9% at the emerging level. By semester 2, proficiency increased to 64.3% on those same equity core beliefs that they focused on in equity in semester 1, and emerging levels dropped to 28.6%, with one school not included due to unforeseen circumstances. We would like to see the percentage of schools demonstrating proficiency continue to grow, and that will be our goal for the upcoming school year. We are currently in the expect phase of implementing the equity core beliefs, reinforcing shared accountability, and deeper integration across our buildings.
Thank you, Shonda. Student Services team has been leaning heavily into the multi-level systems of support, the MLSS work. Key components of that work that are in the expect and evaluate stage of implementation are anchoring social, emotional, and behavioral supports through the Student Success Roadmap, and identifying responding to students' needs through student support teams and their associated practices. For example, attention has been paid to essential teaming elements, such as agenda and data-driven meetings, as well as guaranteed availability of core social, emotional, behavioral interventions, such as SEB groups we talked about earlier. The next step in the evolution of MLSS in Wauwatosa is launching teaming and processes around specific students who need in-depth planning and support. This will be the child study team, as Shonda mentioned. I'm also pleased to report that student services, administration, and office staff continue to activate around the attendance hub, which was launched in 2023. For example, we have attendance letter protocols and meeting requirements related to habitual truancy. The next steps are to bolster our processes around tardies and supportive attendance interventions. Also, I'm excited to share that academic and career planning, also known as ACP, will be moving to center stage with the next strategic plan. Therefore, look for more details during those conversations. And lastly, after study, this past year, our division changed some of our practices and processes around 504 evaluations for efficiency and increased efficacy. And lastly, I'd like to celebrate the implementation of K-8 social emotional learning curriculums, Second Step and Character Strong. This is in the evaluate stage of implementation, which will lead us to examine fidelity.
Thank you, Daryl. The role of the Director of Special Education at the root is to remain current in both state and federal laws as they pertain to serving students who are identified with disabilities and the evaluation process for the identification of disabilities. In service to this role, we have worked to align the evaluation process with the MLSS system Dr. Hansen just described. This has allowed us for informed service to all students, including those identified with disabilities. As a result of this proactive measure, our initial evaluations have decreased. This past year, we went from 201 evaluations to 186 this past year. Service to families and students has been a focus for the past 2 years as well. First, to have collaborative IEP team meetings. Historically, the feedback from families is they did not feel they were an active participant in the IEP team meeting process, and their voice was not being heard. We have an established agenda with role clarity and processes to engage all voices now. This was launched this past year and will continue to be developed over this next year. A second area of focus was having a collaborative service delivery through clarity written within the IEP aids and services. This is intended for all educators, including general education teachers, to better understand their role and how to support students with disabilities within the classroom. We are at the evaluate stage for this area of improvement. Finally, the administration and the special education staff have worked to ensure students with identified disabilities have the proper supports in their IEP, which may support a student with following the code of conduct as described in the disciplinary framework. We are exploring different communication structures to ensure the administration and the special education teachers are teaming when considering plans to support a student prior to or following an incident if the student is having a challenge with following the disciplinary framework. Laura?
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to build upon everything that we kind of discussed because school safety really encompasses everything. We continue to grow and evolve every year. We as a system have a lot to be proud of and areas that we will continue to improve upon. Just some celebrations. We have our safety committee work continues. We have increased safety measures for all of our athletic events. Our digital hall pass system is up and running in our secondary buildings. As Luke mentioned earlier, active supervision and implementation. We just keep pushing that for being active in the building and knowing where students are. Our high school open campus management through Infinite Campus check-in and check-out process. Also, our attendance kiosks allows us to know when students are coming and going from the building, and our secondary levels. And then continuing on that threat assessment process, which Luke had mentioned earlier, is just really getting that big picture of what is happening with that student. Some challenges we continue to have after school supervision in a secondary building is really challenging with a lot of multiple activities going on, clubs, sports, etc. Finding quality student supervisors for the buildings, and making sure that they're doing the proper role that they should be doing, and then obviously budgetary constraints. Goals, we're going to continue to just look at all the safety items from our audit that we had and just making sure we can implement what we can. The referendum work that is happening right now includes a lot of safety and security items, doors, secure entry, access control, surveillance systems, and door monitoring integration are all underway and in development. And then we're just going to continue to decrease those violent behaviors resulting in suspension. We'll continue to work with teachers on what is a classroom managed behavior and what is an office referral. And just work on, improving those student behaviors in the classroom settings and in the hallways. And then the next slide, this is just our overview. Our SROs keep a daily log of calls for service. The one thing I just wanted to point out is that on this slide, the highest percentage of calls for service from our SROs is for community support. Community support can be a range of coming to a game, going to a dance, attending something in the community. So I think that our SROs continue to do what the program is built for in building relationships with students and staff within our buildings. All right.
And finally, one thing we often hear is how can we help between students, parents? It is a community that wants to be working together. So students, if you see something, you want to say something. You want to find an adult to help you solve problems, and just understand your role to contribute positively to the school environment. And parents and guardians, just talk to your children about safety and reinforcing the appropriate school behavior. Talk to your child about the benefits of seeking help rather than trying to solve all their challenges on their own. The adults are there to help them. That is why we are at school. And partner parents and guardians when you're partnering with the school district officials and staff to support your children. We want your children to be successful. So partnering with those staff is really important. And teacher and staff, just well-planned teaching and learning environments, coming to those PLs and learning from them and using that information is just key to all of the work that we're trying to develop here as we develop systems. Develop genuine connections, relationships with students is really the key to many of our challenges at school. And then making sure we have data accuracy so we can find concerns when they show up. So logging incidents in Infinite Campus for accuracy is really important.
And as Stacy said, it does take all of us. Certainly, we are actively teaming with our school administrators, making sure not only are they following the processes, some of which we've highlighted here, and the systems we've developed over the last couple of years, but they're also taking liberties where reasonable and appropriate to meet maybe the unique needs in their own buildings. We sort of put up the fences, and then there is some freedom to be able to move in a little bit of different directions as long as the arrows are still aligned to do what they need to do for their specific populations. Of course, continually developing those relationships, that goes for every group on this slide. And really keep asking questions as it relates to the disciplinary framework. Again, we'll have a discipline norming in August with all administrators. Looking forward to that conversation and training and leveraging some of the tools that may be underutilized, such as the SFAP. For the board, you've been great at really refining policies with a close eye and paying attention to language, catching things, and doing right by all families, all students in that policy. So I really appreciate the work we've done there. I know we still have a lot to do, but that is one piece that really helps us do our jobs. And allocating appropriate finances for student wellness and well-being. We often need funds to be able to do good things for students. And also calibration on incidents that you would expect to see for expulsions. I know we have our panel, but continued conversations and calibrating around that is helpful for me. I think we've gotten a lot of growth in the last few years in that area. And seek to understand the processes that we're outlining here. Student services is a very complex space, as is all school operations. So there's a lot of nuances, and when we speak in educational lingo or systems, that doesn't always resonate with everyone. So ask those questions, come from an inquiry-based lens, so we can help illustrate what we're doing when you have a wonder. And for the general community, we want to work with you. I appreciate and am thankful for all of our community members and staff who push us to do better, who appropriately bring things to our attention to attend to and to improve. We all have that spirit of continuous improvement, but we need our community as well. Come with questions, and work with your staff. Oftentimes, when you jump over the teacher or the school, that is where they have the most power to kind of hear the concern and maybe pivot or help understand what resources in the building might be needed. But we're certainly here if that's not working. With that, we will open it up for questions from the board. Again, we try to encourage you to stay low on that ladder of inference, but we appreciate the time and really appreciate everyone as well. Thank you.